The biggest fraud in human history has been committed in this small country right next to Syria. Lebanon, which was also called the Switzerland of the Middle East, has been completely destroyed today. Today, 80% of Lebanon's population is below the poverty line. 8 out of every 10 Lebanese are unemployed, and the inflation rate has reached 171% just a year ago, where $1 equals to 1,500 Lebanese pounds. Today, $1 equals to 15,000 Lebanese pounds. In almost 100 years, no country has experienced a crisis like Lebanon. People don't even have money to eat. Thousands of people are protesting against the government in the streets. Schools, universities, hospitals, banks, every institution is destroyed. It's done. The government does not even have the salary to pay the government teachers and doctors. The most shocking thing is that only a few years ago, Lebanon was a hot favorite country in the Middle East. Lebanon's GDP was the highest in the entire Middle East. It was famous all over the world for its tourism and banking sector. But then something happened that literally ruined everything in a few months. And the saddest thing is that those who brought Lebanon to this situation are still living a luxury life in full protection. Lebanon's story is of deception, corruption, betrayal to homeland. In this video, we will see how a few people deliberately ruined Lebanon. This story begins in 1975 when a great civil war broke out in Lebanon. This civil war was between different religious and political groups, and each group was supported by foreign countries. Some groups were supported by Iran, some by Syria, and some group by Israel. In this 15-year-long war, 50,000 people were killed, and more than 1 million people had to leave Lebanon. Finally, in 1989, all of the groups sat together and signed an agreement called the Taif Agreement. According to the agreement, the people of each group were given a share in the government of Lebanon to bring peace to Lebanon. Some were given the Ministry of Health, some were given the Ministry of Energy, some were given the Ministry of Finance, and some were given the Ministry of Law. So basically the same people who have been shedding blood in Lebanon for the past 15 years have been given all the power and control in their hands. But because a stable government was formed for the first time after a long civil war, everyone had high hopes from this government. After such a long civil war, Lebanon was completely destroyed economically and infrastructure-wise, and a lot of money was needed to rebuild it. To find a solution to this problem, all these groups sat together again, and they made a plan. And the mastermind of this plan was Riaz Salameh, the main character of this story. He was the biggest financial fraudster in our human history. Riaz was an investment banker working as an assistant vice president at Merrill Lynch, a large U.S. investment firm. In 1993, the Prime Minister of Lebanon appointed Riaz as the governor of the Central Bank of Lebanon, and this is where the story of Lebanon's prosperity and then ruin began. The only purpose of bringing in Riaz was to arrange all the money for the Lebanese government, and there was only one way, and that was foreign loans. Now, because Riaz was a banker, he had a lot of experience in taking loans from IMF, World Bank, and other similar financial institutions. He knew that in order to get a loan from these institutions, you have to show your country's financial situation to be very stable, and the two best ways to image this are one is artificial currency valuation, and the other is high return on investment. Riaz first fixed the rate of the Lebanese pound at 1,500 Lebanese pounds to $1. Whatever happens, the Lebanese government will give you 1,500 Lebanese pounds for $1. A stable currency is very attractive because it means that the country is very stable. No matter what happens, the value of the money lying here will not go down. That is what convinced the IMF and other institutions, and they started giving millions of dollars in loans and aid to Lebanon. At the same time, Riaz played another master stroke by starting to give 8% interest rate to depositors, which means that if you open an account in any bank in Lebanon and keep money there, you will get a guaranteed 8% return on it. Stable currency and guaranteed interest rate. Now money started coming to Lebanon from all over the world. All people started keeping their money in Lebanese banks. Lebanese sitting in other countries also opened accounts in their country and started sending dollars and euros to Lebanon. Money came to Lebanon like water. To increase tourism, the government started spending this money on building infrastructure. Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, became famous throughout the Middle East for its nightlife. Millions of tourists from all over the world started coming to Lebanon every year. Bankers who had earned a few thousand were now playing with millions. Everything was going well for Lebanon, but then in 2011, the Arab Spring began, shaking the entire Middle East. Now the aid received by Lebanon began to go to the countries affected by this spring. The share of aid received by Lebanon now went to Syria, Algeria, Yemen, and Libya. Not only this, but with the same Arab Spring, a great civil war also started in Syria, and 15 million Syrians became refugees and came to Lebanon. There was a huge burden on the economy of Lebanon. Riaz Salameh's financial scheme was under threat because now foreign investors were afraid to send money to Lebanon. And what Riaz did as its solution was unprecedented in the entire history of banking. Riaz announced a policy that local banks buying government securities would get a 40% return, and people holding money in those banks would get a 15% return. Think of government securities as if you have given a loan to government and government will give you 15% annual return on this loan. Its very high interest rate is not found anywhere in the world. Even in America, the world's #1 economy, the central bank gives you only a 5% return on buying government securities. There is no such profit in any business in the world. As a result, people in Lebanon started to sell their houses and keep their money in banks. People were keeping their money in local banks, and those local banks were buying treasuries from the central banks of Lebanon with the same money, and in return they were getting 40% return, of which 15% they were giving to depositors. Once again, money started flowing into Lebanon from all over the world, and especially from the Gulf countries. It seemed as if Lebanon had discovered a secret code for making money. The depositors thought that their money in the bank was doubling, but the reality was something else. Everyone knew that this money was going from the depositors to the local banks and from the local banks to the central bank. But no one knew that beyond the central banks, this money was going to only a few people. These were the same few people who were in the government of Lebanon. And among these people, the most money was going into the pockets of the central bank governor Riaz, the owner of this scheme. This scheme was running very well for some years, but like every scheme, this fraud had to be exposed one day or the other, and the time for the scheme to be exposed came in 2019, when people started to feel something wrong for the first time. Until now, most of the people were not withdrawing money from their bank account. Everyone wanted 15% return, so the account statement showed huge account balances. But every time someone went to withdraw money from their bank, the bankers moved it around. Sometimes they were tempted not to withdraw money that the interest rate was going to rise. Sometimes they were asked a lot of questions and then they were told that you can withdraw your money next week. Gradually, people started to feel a bit fishy. People started sharing their experiences on social media, and suddenly panic spread in the market. People rushed to the banks to withdraw their money. There were long lines outside the banks, but no one was able to withdraw their cash from their own bank account. Banks were not allowing anyone to withdraw more than 30% of his bank balance. Frustration and anger started to increase among the people. Now the people had started to realize that a big fraud had been done to them. The popular social media app WhatsApp was taxed, and after that, as the last line of people's patience was crossed, protests started everywhere. People had millions of Lebanese pounds in their bank accounts, but not even a penny in their pockets. People broke the doors of the bank and entered, but there was no money there. They had taken all these fraudsters out of Lebanon a long time ago. In just 1 month, the Lebanese economy collapsed completely. The Lebanese currency fell by 6,000%, where $1 was worth 1,500 Lebanese pounds. Now $1 was worth 100,000 Lebanese pounds. All foreign investors fled Lebanon within weeks, and the Lebanese government had no money to even pay the salaries of any government servants. Due to the currency devaluation, the prices of everything went up by 1,000%. People were walking on the streets with their personal belongings to be bought. So they take food with this money, pay their children's school fees, give electricity bills. But no one had money. You can imagine that the man who was earning 900 pounds before the crisis was now worth only 50 Lebanese pounds. Lebanon, which was the Sweden of the Middle East, has become the biggest financial tragedy in the Middle East today. The situation today is that 30% of people in Lebanon cannot afford 2 meals a day. Teachers, police officers, people in every government department are on strike, and people are frustrated because of unemployment and poverty. As a result of which the crime rate has doubled, people in the state of desperation are now trying to go to Europe through Turkey and Cyprus illegally by risking their lives. But where are the people responsible for all this tragedy? They are still living in luxury with millions of dollars. None of the fraudsters have been caught, and the mastermind of this whole scheme, Riaz Salameh, is still living in Lebanon with full protocol and guards. According to documents released in 2021, Riaz has earned $300 million from this entire scheme, most of which has been kept in offshore bank accounts. Richer is never caught. What they have done with Lebanon, its politicians, its bureaucrats, its religious leaders, is unbelievable. All our educational institutions have to do only one thing, and that is to educate the young generation against corruption and drill it in their minds. That corruption is a death warrant, be it financial or moral. No corrupt person or country can survive for long.